President Trump is moving forward with tariffs on steel and aluminum imports to the United States.
There's a lot of kind of what now going on, really, frankly, in the markets with companies and also with political figures around the world today.
France's bold actions have shocked the U.S. economy, leaving even its EU allies stunned. What started as a trade spat has escalated into a significant global power shift. The impact is already rewriting the rules of international trade.
Say 25% tariff on foreign aluminum, copper, lumber, and steel, because if we don't have, as an example, steel and lots of other things, we don't have a military and frankly we just won't have a country very long.
As 2025 began, so did America's streak of bad decisions. The U.S. made a bold move, slapping a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum. It sounded patriotic, a way to protect American industries and jobs. But beneath the surface, this move sent shockwaves through global trade, sparking chaos no one fully expected.
It will definitely happen with the European Union, I can tell you that, because they've really taken advantage of us. And, we have over a $300 billion deficit. They don't take our cars, they don't take our farm products, they take almost nothing.
The U.S. seemed confident, but this wasn't just about trade. It was a risky gamble that underestimated the strength and strategy of its allies, mainly France, which was already gearing up for a bold counterattack.
So my top priority is to say what? First, Europe has to innovate. This is the first message. We have to innovate, invest, accelerate. My top priority.
France didn't take this lightly. Almost immediately, the sparks flew. The U.S.'s move was seen as an outright economic assault on European industries, especially automotive giants heavily dependent on steel and aluminum imports. For France, the message was clear. If the U.S. wanted a trade war, they were ready for battle. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot didn't mince words when he declared, "We won't stand by while our industries suffer."
That the EU is prepared to immediately put into effect these retaliatory tariffs. We know last time around when Trump enacted tariffs on steel and aluminium.
Within days, France retaliated with lightning speed. Retaliatory measures were drafted that targeted American exports, hitting everything from agricultural goods to high-value consumer products. And France didn't act alone.
We were listening carefully to those words, and of course we are preparing also on our side.
Behind closed doors, European Union leaders convened emergency meetings to map out a unified response. These were no ordinary discussions. This was Europe, led by France, strategizing its most aggressive economic counterpunch in decades. What shocked many observers was the boldness of France's approach. Even Brussels, often seen as cautious and bureaucratic, was taken aback by how swiftly and decisively Paris moved.
Our view is very clear. We want the best of the world, so we want our own research, our own startups to grow up and scale up, but we want to team up as well with American, Indian, Gulfian, Chinese players.
France's response was strategic. The country knew it couldn't fight this battle alone, so it turned to its allies within the EU. France positioned itself as the leading voice of European resistance, rallying support to craft a collective strategy. What started as a US-France dispute quickly morphed into a broader transatlantic confrontation, with the EU standing firmly behind France's hardline stance. This wasn't merely about tariffs anymore. It was about Europe drawing a line in the sand against what it saw as US economic bullying.
That the French are very worried about what they're seeing in terms of their security, Europe's security, the use of nuclear weapons, and so on. So there are a lot of questions.
But why was France so aggressive? The answer lies in the domino effect the US tariffs created. By raising the cost of raw materials, these tariffs hit the European automotive industry, one of its most critical economic sectors, where it hurt most. European giants like Renault, Peugeot, and Citroën are operating on razor-thin margins, and were suddenly hit with a 25% increase in material costs due to the US tariffs on steel and aluminum. For an industry that depends heavily on these raw materials, this was a crushing blow. French automakers immediately faced skyrocketing production costs, with no clear way to absorb the shock.
But he's also announced a broader suite of tariffs that could literally hit any country in the world, right? He's definitely mentioned German car makers as something that he's opposed to, as long as they're exporting from.
But the crisis wasn't limited to France. Germany's automotive powerhouses, BMW, Volkswagen, and Mercedes-Benz, were equally blindsided. Rising raw material costs created a domino effect, throwing global supply chains into disarray. BMW reported a 12% drop in profit margins in Q1 of 2025, while Volkswagen had to temporarily halt production at two of its key plants in Wolfsburg and Emden due to material shortages. Mercedes-Benz, traditionally seen as one of the more resilient players, announced a 15% reduction in vehicle output for the European market, a decision that sent shockwaves across Germany's industrial sector.
It means if you put tariffs on a lot of sectors, it will increase the costs and create inflation in the US. Is it what your people want? I'm not so sure.
And this wasn't just a European problem. Ironically, US automakers also found themselves caught in the very web their government had spun. General Motors and Ford, for example, experienced significant cost hikes in sourcing steel and aluminum domestically, whereas Tesla's sale is on the ground too.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and French President Emmanuel Macron have signed 15 business contracts worth billions of euros in Paris.
As the automotive industry grappled with this chaos, France wasn't waiting idly. Instead, it made a bold move that shifted the global economic landscape, a pivot to China. In a development that stunned observers, France announced a groundbreaking $8.9 billion trade partnership with China in February 2025. While this partnership caught many off guard, its roots lay in French President Emmanuel Macron's earlier diplomatic efforts.
Signed deals worth $15 billion that span across agriculture, energy, and aeronautics.
During his 2020 visit to Beijing, Macron secured 18 deals across critical sectors like aviation, agriculture, and automotive technology. It was clear that France had been laying the groundwork for this alliance well before the trade war escalated.
I think it's a challenge because the vehicle industry as a whole employs a huge number of workers across Europe. And they can see that they're at risk, especially since they are not producing electric vehicles in Europe.
One of the key elements of this partnership was leveraging China's dominance in electric vehicle EV battery technology. As the world's largest producer of lithium-ion batteries, China held the key to the future of EVs, a sector where both France and the EU had lagged behind the US and Asia. By teaming up with Chinese firms, French automakers positioned themselves to not just survive but thrive in a post-tariff world. Renault's joint venture with BYD, China's EV giant, was a particularly strategic move. By mid-2025, the partnership had led to the development of a new line of EVs with production costs that undercut competitors by nearly 20%.
The United States imposed an additional 10% across the board on all products coming in from China and Hong Kong to the United States.
But this pivot wasn't just about cars. It was a bold chess move in a much larger game. With US tariffs squeezing its industries, China needed to expand its trade network, and France seized the opportunity. Their $8.9 billion partnership wasn't just another trade deal. It was a direct challenge to the US's global dominance. By deepening ties with China, France effectively bypassed US pressure, securing access to affordable raw materials and cutting-edge technologies.
Europe has to accelerate. Europe has to innovate.
The ripple effect was enormous. This partnership strengthened the EU's hand, inspiring other member states to explore similar deals with Beijing. It was a strategic masterstroke. While Washington doubled down on its trade war, Paris quietly built bridges with the world's second largest economy, and it paid off. By Q2 of 2025, French exports to China had skyrocketed by 22%, fueled by booming demand for agricultural products and advanced machinery.
And in retaliation, as you noted, China has announced its own retaliatory tariffs to start not until March 10th.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, U.S. exports to Europe and China were in freefall. aerospace and agriculture were hit hardest, bearing the full weight of the EU's retaliatory tariffs. The message was clear. While the US played hardball, France and China played the long game, and they were winning. What's clear is that France's pivot to China wasn't just a reaction to the trade war, it was a calculated strategy to reshape its economic future. And as the dust settles, it's becoming increasingly evident that this gamble is paying off in ways that few could have predicted. The question now is whether the rest of the world, particularly the US, can keep up. But here's the real kicker: whispers of long-term trade shifts. Insiders revealed that the EU was quietly working to diversify its imports and exports, especially toward Asia and South America. If the US thought this spat would blow over in a few months, it was sorely mistaken. Brussels was playing the long game, and it was a game the US wasn't ready for.
Not just about protecting American jobs, they're about protecting the soul of our country.
And here's the shocking part. Some experts quietly suggested that this might be the beginning of the end for the US as the world's economic leader. If the EU and other regions successfully diversified away from US reliance, Washington could find itself on the outside. So hit like and subscribe. And stay tuned because this economic showdown is just heating up.